Hello everyone, welcome to your weekly tech update, the show that explores the newest, coolest, and sometimes crazy side of tech available on the interwebs. I am your video game geek, Ray McNeil. Coming up on the program today, Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. This is one of my favorite times of year because as a gaming geek, this is when we get all of our new games and we actually have time to sit down and play them. So that's what we're talking about today, the newest, coolest games on the horizon. That includes System Shock. Their long-in-the-works remake is now set to launch next year. The Matrix Resurrections has a new official trailer and they have released The Matrix Awakens. It's an experience available to play right now for the PS5 and Series X. Happening in this week's What The, an axe-wielding man locked people inside of an arcade and went on a 2-day game-smashing rampage. And of course, we'll wrap up the program with this week's Moment of Joy. All that and a whole lot more coming up on today's edition of your weekly tech update next. If you've been wondering where Night Dive Studios' long-in-the-works System Shock remake has been, well, it didn't really make its previously announced late summer 2021 release window, now did it. The developers are now saying that the project will be out sometime next year. It'll be published by Koch Media's Prime Matter division, and there are a selection of new screenshots to tide people over until more solid release dates and more news come our way. It has, of course, been a very long time and an eventful road for the System Shock remake. It was originally intended to be a remaster of Looking Glass Technology's cult classic 1994 sci-fi horror before ballooning in scope. By the time its Kickstarter commenced in July of 2016, Night Dive was calling it a reboot, and after a rocky period of development, the studio announced it was putting the project on hiatus after letting things get out of control. That was a quote. Night Dive eventually managed to get its remake back on track, albeit by essentially restarting with a more focused goal. And development has been steadily ticking forward ever since, with the studio providing frequent progress updates over on Kickstarter, even going as far as to announce that late summer release window earlier this year. That obviously never came to pass, but Night Dive did address the game's no-show in September, telling Kickstarter backers, "I know there has been some confusion over dates and announcements, which is an unfortunate reality of making games, but I can assure you that System Shock is on the way. We have big news to share in the future that will help make sense of what's been going on." That news presumably is today's announcement that System Shock's remake will now be published by Koch Media's Prime Matter division, marking Night Dive's first external publishing deal. In a statement accompanying the news, Night Dive CEO Stephen Kick said that the deal would allow us to offer System Shock to fans all over the world, both in digital and physical goods formats, as well as fully honor our commitment to our fans and in particular to our thousands of supporters on Kickstarter, without whom this game would not have been possible. This year may have seen Night Dive show off its long-awaited System Shock remake in various guises, but we've seen new gameplay footage and even a PC demo recently. But those eager for a more current glimpse of the game now have at least a fresh selection of screenshots to peruse at your leisure, while they await firmer news of its arrival on PlayStation 4, 5, Xbox One, Xbox Series X and S, and of course the PC sometime next year. Oh man, one of the long-awaited games to be powered by the PS5 is Gran Turismo 7, and we have a new behind-the-scenes look, and I'm just going to let the video speak for itself.
The performance of the PS5 gives us for the first time something we've been striving for throughout the Gran Turismo series. I personally feel that we've finally achieved a level of realism that's kind of tangible. In terms of how haptic feedback and adaptive triggers are used, one way these are used is to recreate the feel of the brakes. For example, when brakes are effective to a certain point and they lock up, the resistance on the trigger is cancelled. We're trying to use the adaptive triggers to express these kinds of phenomena. In Gran Turismo 7, Scapes will also support ray tracing, which means that cars now look even better. I think that images, which previously looked like CGI, no longer look that way. That's what ray tracing does. 4K, 60p, and HDR are also things that make the game more realistic. When I get to drive on the tracks, I really feel like the realism has exceeded a certain level, and that's always very striking. The kind of natural feeling that we've been trying to achieve in Gran Turismo from the start. And I found it pretty moving, actually.
I don't know how you personally feel about all these reboots and rehashes of games. If they're a good game and it's pulled off well, I'm all for it. And after refusing to do anything meaningful with the Splinter Cell license in the years since 2013's Blacklist aftermath, Ubisoft seems to have heard the fans' cries because it's decided to bring sneaky spy Sam Fisher back in a new remake of the original 2002 Xbox Classic. Ubisoft Toronto, the developer behind Splinter Cell Blacklist and more recently Far Cry 6, is spearheading the remake. And don't get it twisted. This is a remake of the original stealth action title, not a remaster. In a Ubisoft blog post, producer Matt West suggested that gamers have an even more refined palette now. As such, the studio is building the project from the ground up, including updating visuals and revitalizing design elements in an effort to better suit modern players. It's plausible for a remake of such an old game to stray further afield, like perhaps going open world, but West said in the blog that the game will retain its traditional linearity. The project's focuses are exploration and innovation, and according to creative director Chris Audi, the remake will serve as a solid base for the franchise's future. Ubisoft Toronto is still in the early stages of development, so there's not yet word on a release window or which platform the Splinter Cell remake will launch on, but we're guessing all of them. All we know is that it's coming, and the studio is looking for talent.